I'm going to call this video Access All Areas question mark. Okay, not written question mark, but with a question mark. Okay, which I think is quite a good title for these. Bear with me, this is going to be a bit of a long one. This was a night of crazy, crazy, crazy dreams. The last dream, though, is the main one, as it always is. And if you've seen any kind of amount of videos, you will know that that is. So it's the last video. That's really the one. That is the one. But because there's a lead up to this, I mean, to be honest, I read this through the first time, and I was putting together my dream journal. Literally yesterday. It was yesterday. And I was talking to my mum about it. I was like, I don't know whether to include this. I just can't see that there's anything really in there that's worth me kind of doing it. But I noticed that there's one part where there's the actor Jonathan Rumi, who plays Jesus in the, the series that's on TV. Again, you know the name, but and because of that, and the literally days later, or it might be a week. No, it's about a week later. I have another one with him in it. Just so you know, I'm not watching the shows. I haven't watched like the recent couple of seasons. I probably should do, but he was in another one as well, and it's because he was in two in very different capacities, even from different films, his characters and stuff. It made me think, okay, well, this is connecting the two, so this has got to be important. So rather than me getting rid of it, I thought I'll write it down and then I'll see whether there's anything that comes up. Okay, so that's kind of like the introduction. There's about four parts to this dream, all in one night, one after another, without waking up. And it's the last part really that is the main part. Okay, so I won't kind of drag this out anymore. So first part, I might go a bit fast, but it's purely because I'm trying to cut it down to get to the best bits. Okay, so the first part is set in a hotel. It looks very much like an orphanage. Okay, so very, very weird for a hotel setup. So it's kind of bed gap, bed gap, bed gap, bed gap, bed gap, and everybody's just sitting on, almost like I suppose you see like with the military, where they've got some bunk beds and there's just loads of beds in one big open area. It was like that, but it wasn't bunk beds. It was standard sort of like doubles and stuff like that. But it was a place that you would, as I said, it was a hotel. It wasn't an orphanage or anything like that. But loads and loads of beds in a row. A bit strange. The section I was in had about 5 beds, and I was just a bit confusing. It's like I woke. It's almost like I woke up in that place, and I was like, well, how did I get here? This sort of thing. I was my current age, yet I looked exactly the same as when I was about 16. So I had black hair, believe it or not, black hair, pretty much black hair, only very, very dark brown. Centre parting, all kind of like curtains, kind of like completely different. And a lot of my mates were there. One of my mates, Darren, who I've mentioned previously, has been in a few dreams. So he's in the Call to Faith series. So he's a hairdresser by trade. He's got his own business, and he was there, and he was kind of looking at the back of my hair, and he was saying, "Oh, it's a right mess. We've got to sort this out." And so he was trying to cut my hair and talk to me about my hair and stuff like that. And we were all together, and some, in this area. And we'd been there for 4 days, and I had paid for another day, had one day left. And my wife was coming and visiting, so she wasn't actually there. And it was like, this is like the worst place. You could never have any kind of intimacy at all because it's all just so out in the open, And yeah, he was going to, anyway, Darren was going to sort out my hair. A lot of my mates were there as well, so other usual suspects really. So Chris, Mike, who I've mentioned before, Rick, who's been in like one dream. Mike's only been like 1 or 2 dreams, but these are all like childhood kind of friends, from like early school through to higher upper school and into obviously leaving school. We all kind of stayed friends around this sort of time frame. But yeah, we're all buzzing about listening to music and stuff like that, which is what we used to do, So that's pretty much all it was. So I only put it in there just to wonder whether there's any kind of significance to it. There's something about age and maturity versus immaturity or something like that. There's a little bit of a theme that goes through, so that's why I left it in there. Part 2 anyway. So this time I'm working in an open office environment, which is exactly where I worked. So again, this office has been in multiple dreams. So I was listening to I actually listen to my own videos just to see if they sound all right. Did they come across right? Did I kind of capture the things I wanted to? And if there's something that's missing, then I might put it in the comments, like pin that to the top as to, oh, sorry, I said this. That was just on the fly, actually it's this. And I corrected myself, you see, in one of the videos. But this one's measured, this actual office is actually mentioned in the Zombie Apocalypse one, which is part of the Bridge series. So same office. Okay, so I'm in the office. I'm doing all same sort of jobs I used to do. So this was all like anti-fraud kind of bits and pieces and general sort of administration stuff at the back end, really, of what banks get up to. In their branch networks, we would do the back end stuff of keeping it all. Being like a second line of defense against certain things. But I was doing those kind of jobs anyway. So anti-fraud, all that sort of stuff. And basically what happened, and this is how this was exactly the same as how it was, back when I used to work there, is you'd walk in the office and it'd be kind of like a little bit like when you're going on like the going through a train, getting on a train or whatever. You've got the places where you tap your card, don't you? And then you go through. There's normally like some sort of a barrier, almost like a turnstile thing that you go through as long as you've tapped your card and it's taken your payment, that kind of thing. So this was the same thing, but it was with a security card. It was a magnetic card that you just tap on there. It'd read the card is valid and you would go through. Okay, and that was just to get into the building. And then there would be security doors all over the place that all had the card that you needed to get everywhere. The lift, everywhere. You couldn't really go anywhere without your card. So if you lost that, you'd have to say to one of your mates, look, can I just borrow your card? Because I need to go to, not the toilet, it wasn't that extreme, but I need to get out. I'm going out for lunch and I need your card so I can come back in. Okay, so if you bear that in mind. And as soon as you came into the building as well, there was also a security desk as well. There was normally a couple of security guards that would be there and they'd walk around the office and stuff like that, just making sure we're all behaving ourselves, I suppose. So that's how this was. I'm not really going to go back to the notes too much on this one because I only just wrote it, so it's very fresh in my mind. But basically what happened was I'd lost my pass. I'd lost that card that gave me access everywhere. So I didn't really have any access. And I for some reason, I kind of left it a bit too long. Like I should have spoken to the guy on security and said, look, I've lost my card, deactivate it, and can you do something about reissuing me one, like a visitor's pass? I did have to do that in the past, where I'd lost one or it just stopped working, and so I got a new one. I do actually remember having a visitor's pass, actually, like on a, what's it called, like they called lanyard, whatever they're called, that kind of thing, hanging over my neck. I remember having that before with the visitor thing, and you kind of feel a bit weird, having one. But this is basically what happened. I'd lost it somewhere or something like that, and I was feeling like bad about looking to actually mention the fact that I'd lost it because I thought I was going to get in trouble or something like that. So what I'd done, like I just mentioned, was I'd asked a mate, can I borrow yours for a bit while I do something? And I'd sort of hung on to this card. For some reason I hadn't given it back. I guess I'd gone home or something and I had it in my pocket and never got round to really actually getting a new pass. The same thing happened actually with I think it was my manager. I'm not 100%, but I'm pretty sure it was my manager who was running a big area. And I borrowed hers for some reason. She probably said, yeah, there you go. While she's doing her work or whatever, just handed it to me and I hadn't given it back. Okay, so this was creating some drama in the office. All kind of, not the average person was aware of this drama, but, my manager was always, every now and then you'd sort of hear it go, where's my pass? I think I've lost my pass. And because she was obviously higher up, I was very on guard. Now, I was going from place to place and I was using the pass. Every time I used her pass, it was flagging, you see, with security. And I remember going over to her sort of area where I had to talk to her on her desk or something, which was all open plan, so she was kind of in amongst everybody else. And I went over and she was looking at an email, and it said of all the suspects of who was close to her when she reported the fact that her pass had gone missing. And there was 5 names on it, and I noticed my name was on it, and I was kind of like, oh, she's been given a bit of a heads up. I better be on my guard a bit. But the problem was, you see, is I didn't want her to think I'd stolen it, although I sort of had, because I wasn't giving it back. But at the same time, it was because I felt really bad. I didn't want to give it back and get in trouble, lose my job or something like that. So I was planning on maybe just dropping this card somewhere You know, knowing now that she knew I was a suspect, I was kind of thinking, well, if I drop the card and now give it to her, it's going to look like it was me anyway. You know, equally, if I drop the card, I mean, will she pick it up? That kind of thing. I was less worried about my mate, to be honest. I was worried about my job. You know, that was the main thing here, and so I was thinking of ways to do it. And there was a situation where I dropped the card, and I was near like a photocopier or something like that, or a printer or something like that, and I was always looking around, you know, is anybody going to see me dropping this card and walking away, you know, to hand it back to me like, oh, sorry, yeah. And there was cameras everywhere. So I was kind of trying to find somewhere where there wasn't a camera that I could drop this and then kind of report it back, or just hope somebody else would hand it in and I'll be off the hook, you know. So this is all going on, okay? So this is all sort of going on, and I'm just very uneasy. I remember there was even a bit where I sat down and I was wearing shorts, and in my side pocket is where I put my pass, and the pass was sliding out, and the passes had our photos on them, you see. So if she'd seen her photo on it, she would know that I'd nicked it. So I was really, really wary, and I was kind of like sort of putting my body in a weird position so that there's no way that this pass would slide out of my pocket. So as I said, somewhat a bit naughty really, and yeah, as I said, felt really bad about my manager. Yeah, and I think what happened was I got found out. I didn't see the altercation, you know, where you know, I was told off or anything, but I believe what happened was I got demoted. So I don't know where. I never really got, there was no real positions other than just doing the job and then a manager. So I don't know what demotion really looked like, but I was demoted. And now this is weird, this bit, right? So I'm wandering around. It's a big open office. I just happen to be wandering around from area to area, so quite big distances. Maybe I would wander around to do my job. And there was a guy there. Okay, so yeah, there's a guy there who sort of said, "Oh, Dave, I've heard about what's happened. You know, sad to hear about. Obviously, you get you know, effectively losing money." Okay, so I think, as I said, what came across was I'd been demoted or something. My pay had gone down as a kind of, you know, as a basically repercussions really for me, seen as being stealing this, where I hadn't been stealing it really. You know, I just had it a little bit too long. And he said, "Look, I can help you out. If I've, you know, I can put you in contact with, you know, so I can get some extra money for you." So basically, this guy was essentially saying, "Look, if you need a bit of help, you need a bit of a top up of your wages, I can kind of help out." Now, this guy, I identified exactly who he was. All right. Now I know exactly who he was. So he'd be the like the pop star that say, "Will I am." Okay. Now, what's interesting about that is that name. The fact that it's got "I am" in it, which is a name that God goes by in the Bible. So he's, you may have heard it in just general common saying, "Oh, look at him, he's he's the big I am," you know, that kind of thing, which is a reference actually. That, you know, a lot of these things you just don't know that they're a Bible reference. I've noticed so many since becoming a Christian, the general sort of things that you would sling around as comments to various different things, and you think, "Oh no way, that's actually a Bible thing." Yeah. Oh look, he's walking around, puffing his chest out like he's the big I am. Again, you know, that sort of thing. Anyway, so this was Will I am, okay, the pop star guy, and he was the one who was saying, "I can get you a top up on your wages," which is interesting because if he is meant to represent the I am, is there a message there of there's a top up in my wages coming somewhere through a different source? What, like YouTube? That's what I thought of, but I mean, I've got, obviously there's not many people that are watching my videos at the moment, so it takes some real effort to get that going. But yeah, as I said, I was my current. Oh, this is where I wanted to include this as well as a bit before, because I was my current age, but I was surrounded by much younger people around about age 18, and they were all talking about, you know, who's hot and who's not, and I was thinking I am blatantly on the not list, and I just felt really out of place, you know, because I left there when I was probably mid-20s. I would have thought around that mark, maybe a little bit older, up to about 30. But I started when I was 18. It was like my first job. I went straight into that, and so 18-year-olds, yeah, I mean, I would have been surrounded by 18-year-olds when I was doing that job a lot of the time. And we just grew up together. It's that kind of office environment. You never want to leave. You know, it's just so much fun. Anyway, so prior to this employee pass issue, Actually, no, I'm not sure. It was before. It was during. Oh yeah, sorry, because I've just been talking about it's all been resolved, hasn't it? I've been found out. Okay, so before I'd actually been found out about this, we were outside on this grass area. Okay, so it's a big, large grass area, and it's like an area that almost like people would go out. It was part of the grounds of the office, and you would just sort of sit there and maybe eat your lunch if you wanted to get a bit of sun. But this kind of garden-like grass area was a bit odd. Okay, so as I said, you'd go out of the office and then you'd be into this grass area, and it was kind of like it's all landscaped. So it was kind of like you would have like um, almost like one brick high, let's say, or something like that. So not very deep, but you'd have like kind of small levels up in this garden, very very small, that were kind of would you'd have like a pattern or something like that of the grass, just about a little bit up, and you would kind of like step up onto another area. There's another bit of grass, step up, another bit of grass, etc. And then right at the back, so when you got to the last grass bit, where it's kind of all these sort of like overlapping grass sort of areas, it looked quite nice, really, really well mown, almost mowed, even like a almost like a almost like a golf course. It was just so well maintained. This garden was so well maintained, and it had this around the edge of this garden was a big chasm. It was like a sheer drop, massive drop off the edge. And in some areas it was quite wide, other areas it's a little bit tighter, and it was like it. I don't know. It was very very strange. But it was a big chasm, and then there was another bit where the other side was just again a bit more grass and stuff like that, and that was effectively outside the territory of let's say territory. That sounds a bit dramatic, doesn't it? Outside the actual area of the office, and that was just public land, that say, or something like that. Because I remember looking across and seeing a pub and thinking, I'd quite like to escape this garden, and that's what was weird about it. So it felt like almost you were kind of captured within these grounds that are around your office, and you couldn't escape unless you were willing to make the jump from this grass across this chasm to the other side. And I was kind of like scoping it out. I felt almost like in a prison almost, and like you see on films, and you're looking to see if there's a little break in the fence or something like that where you can escape, and there's like a watchtower that's looking, and then they're going to start shooting you. I mean, that's an over dramatization really, but it was that kind of thing, where you're looking at it, you're like thinking, why is this massive chasm? Why is there not a bridge, or why is there not any way of getting out other than obviously coming out the front door the way you came in and exiting that way? Okay, so yeah, that kind of reminded me, and I'll explain why. So I'm kind of going into some of the meaning as we go, because it almost made me think of the narrow path, because it was like everyone was there. I seemed to be the only one that wanted to escape, and I was kind of like, why don't you want to escape? And I didn't know whether this kind of grass area was almost like you're escaping this kind of work world that you were in, but it was the narrow point that I was looking to jump across, and it made me think of the narrow path, which is talked about in the Bible. Obviously, there wasn't an actual path, other than the path would be jumping this chasm. Okay, but yeah, that was something that kind of came out to me. But there was another part that was really interesting actually, and I don't quite know what this means. To be honest, it was very very odd. There was a bit where are we? Yeah, so I'm back into this area. So I said about the area you were kind of like the lobby area, let's say, of the office, is you'd have like a security desk, you'd have the 2 points you'd have to come through, to get into the office area. Everything had passes everywhere. So again, at this point, I haven't been found out, I've still got the pass. Okay, but I was doing a lot of naughty stuff anyway. So I was kind of like, if somebody was going in and they did the pass on the door, then quite often in our office, what we would do is we would hold the door open and go, there you go, mate, just like holding it for you, and you would come in. And we were always told off really for doing that, because the idea is everyone who's has to have a pass to get in. So we did a lot of what we call tailgating, which is where you would just like you would do. I mean, it's called tailgating. for people who come through behind you and sneak through at the same time you're going through that turnstile kind of thing with the train, going on the London Underground, for example. So it was kind of like that. So I was kind of like sneaking through, and there was this guy who was going through, so I just kind of snuck through with him. And about this office was that there was two lifts. So this is all like what reality was like. There's two lifts. One of them was completely shut down. It wasn't working at all. So there's only one lift that was working, and this lift had like loads of orange cones around it and kind of like tape across it and stuff like that. And there was loads of these lift engineers that were around, and they're kind of working on it, and we're sort of looking at them thinking, so we not got a working lift? And the guy was like, no, it's all right, just sort of ducked down, and we kind of sort of made our way through all this tape and stuff, and I was like, is this thing working? And it's like, yeah, it's all right, we're working on it, but yeah, it's all right, you can still use it. I was like, oh, okay, all right. So anyway, so I get in this lift along with this other guy that I've, as I said, just sort of snuck in behind. And yeah, we get in the lift, and the lift starts moving, but it doesn't move far at all. Far at all, and the lights are in the lift just go off completely, and it goes pitch black. But then there's this almost like a TV monitor, like quite a biggish screen that kind of almost comes down from the ceiling, and a TV comes on, and it starts playing this video. Really weird, really weird. I can't really remember the content, but it almost felt like it was the feel I got from it was like propaganda or something. And it was like, as I said, it was dark, and it was kind of almost like a red, like an emergency light that sort of came on. And again, that kind of reminded me of the Red and Black. It kind of, oh yes, that probably wasn't a coincidence. I watched one of my videos today, actually. What is that one called? Oh no, what is that one called? Ah, yes, it's called The Suffering Servant. Look for The Suffering Servant, and now you'll know why. I was like, oh, I know what it is. It's the colours, black and red. Okay, so I'm pretty sure this is, as I said, the lift went completely black. This came down, and it was like the TV was surrounded by like red, or there was backlit red, and it felt like it was spouting loads of propaganda or something like that. Weirdly, the guy I was with just passed out, and I was then thinking, well, how do we get these doors open so I can get this guy out? Because I don't know what the problem is with him. But as I said, it felt like it was propaganda. Now that's going to make sense. Okay. Now, if you look at the Suffering Servant, they're red and black. Spoiler. But it's really interesting video. That one is the black and red actually related to the Antichrist. Okay, so those two colours, and there's an interesting progression as to how that was. So that is, as I said, that's called Suffering Servant / Mark of the Beast. Really interesting one. Definitely watch that one. I know these are my dreams and I'm bigging them up, but they are genuinely interesting. Again, these are not dreams I've just made up, I've just thought up. These are, again, as far as I'm concerned, they are definitely from God, because the messaging is so clear and you remember them. Again, I could recall that entire thing which happened, that I can't even remember when that one was. It was a while back, but definitely check that one out, okay? So the red and the black probably means something to do with a beast system or something to do with the Antichrist. I think that's probably what it means. Yeah, weird. There you go. In video revelation, that sometimes does happen. So I think that's what it was to do with. As I said, I wouldn't have thought of that if I hadn't watched that video today. Okay, black and red. What am I doing? Right, so third part. Let's get into the third part. Oh, I was going to quickly show you, actually. Sorry, 1 second. I'm just going to show you. Here you go. Here's my very, very tidy notes. But that was that garden I just mentioned. So it's like these weird kind of, I was coming out of the office, there was a grass bit, and there were kind of like really weird shapes, the gardens. But it's like one level goes up to another level. And then you can see that narrow point there, which is what I was searching for as a spot to sort of jump across. What I didn't, I put the chasm on there. No idea how to spell chasm. That doesn't look right at all, but it doesn't really matter. I didn't even plan on showing it. What you won't see is that I didn't draw a little pub, but there was a pub there. Anyway, I'll flip it back. There we go. I didn't quite make the mistake of having my face right up against the screen this time. Okay, cool. So we're going into part... So I talked about the gardens, escape from the gardens, etc., etc. Part 4. So this is the the best part. I think it's brilliant. But again, this came as revelation yesterday and today. So I was writing it, and again, as often happens when you're writing these out, this is where the revelation comes in. Okay, so I'm just going to read it as it is. Okay, so part 4. This is all just continuous. Okay, so I'm sort of going from. I think when the lift thing happened, I think that's where the dream ended. Or I'm not sure whether it ended at the gardens I was just talking about as well. It may have ended there. I'm not quite sure of the order, but I put this down as part 4 because the thing is, when you wake up from a dream and it's got multiple parts, a lot of the time you'll write down the thing that is most important to you, or that was most recent, and then you kind of work your way backwards quite often. Or so sometimes they're out of sequence, and you try and make the most logical effort to get something in a logical order, but sometimes you always look at it and think, I don't know quite which way it went round. But moving past that office scene now, so that's the end of the office scene. That's been sort of done, dealt with. Now we're on to section 4, part 4. So again, right, so this is me outside, and I'm in a kind of an outside environment surrounded by grass and general wildlife, trees, bushes, all of that kind of stuff. Okay, and I'm going to show you a little picture of my rubbish picture. So outside, so I'm it kind of starts with me being outside and coming up to a person that is kneeling down, and they've got they've got a chisel, and they're working on stone. Okay, and yeah, I'm going to try and read this rather than doing that. So, yeah, so we're outside, and I identify this person as being Jonathan Rumi, who plays Jesus in The Chosen. Okay, now think of this another way as well. Again, is that when I had my first true experience with Jesus, the Jesus, not a dreamt up Jesus, the real Jesus. I thought it was Jim Caviezel, so who plays Jesus in The Passion of Christ. Okay, so again, bear that in mind, and again, spoiler, this, I didn't get anything like the same vibe from this Jonathan Rumi than I did with that experience. That was just a one-off. I've never had anything like that, and I don't dream of Jesus very frequently at all. So this is the third time, I think. Again, I've said Jesus already, but you see where I'm going to be going with this. Okay, so Jonathan Rumi, who plays Jesus, so he is sort of squatting down, and he's working as a stonemason. Okay, really. So he's got a chisel, and he's working, banging away on this what looks like a channel. So if you imagine, it's probably about the width of roughly about the width of the laptop I've got in front of me. So how would I describe that? About 30 centimeters. So what's that? About 12 inches roughly wide, this channel, and I can already see it in front of me. Basically, this channel, it's going downhill, and it's going towards a. I can't actually see it, I don't think, initially as to where it's going to, but it's going to a pond, sort of water area. Okay, but it's going downhill. Okay, so he's chiseling away. He's chiseling away, and I said to him, I kind of got down to his level. Yeah, so I'm now crouching while he's doing it. I'm on his level, because it would be a bit weird, wouldn't me standing up and him having to sort of stop what he's doing and look up at me and answer my questions and talk to me. So I've just got down to his level. Okay, so I'm now squatting kind of next to him, and I'm sort of saying to him, like, I really admire what you do. I love your work. Now that makes me sound like, obviously, me complimenting Jonathan Rumi on his acting career, but I'm not. I'm not comment. I'm not commending him. This is purely on this character at this time, who is chiseling away, as I said, and I'm saying I really admire the work that you do. From masonry, and I said I imagine you'll be the last generation. Okay, interesting phrase I decided to use there. I imagine you're going to be the last generation, in the his skills, I imagine, will just kind of die out. I don't know how many stonemasons there are around, but I don't imagine there's a huge kind of demand for them. But I bet that they can actually demand a lot in wages because of there being a small amount of them at the same time. But I bet that after you, there's probably not going to be anybody, not really going to be any stonemasons around anymore. It's not the sort of thing that you see very often. And as I said, I was actually sitting with him, and I was kind of trying to learn from him. I know. I was sort of crouching down, as I said, we're crouching down pretty much next to each other with this channel. As I said, I'm calling it a channel, and I knew that this was meant for water. It's very, very basic, so it's just got like a rim, like a rim to it, and then it's just nice flat stone, nice smooth stone. And he's chiseling. I don't really know what he's doing though, to be honest, with his chiseling. But it was me probably seeing, I guess he's been progressing from the front and he's working his way backwards, because I'm just seeing him sort of static working on what he's working on. And as I said, I'm actually sort of crouching, etc., and I'm talking to him, and I'm trying to learn from him. Okay, so what he was creating, as I said, was this this channel of stone, which was for a stream. Okay, so a stream of water was going to go down here. And he was making it perfectly smooth, so he was just making sure it was perfect. Okay, carved out of stone, and it was obviously a channel for water. I said, oddly, I couldn't see the source of the water anywhere, so all I could see was like he was preparing this ahead of some sort of water, but I couldn't see any sort of water that was going to be created from this. It was quite odd. As I said, I was at this point where he'd gone as far as he's gone. Like behind me, there was nothing. It was just he was working on this bit that was in front of us, and it went down, and I could see it go down this sort of slight decline. And yeah, he was cutting this channel out, which was leading to a pond. I'd call it a pond. It wasn't a massive amount of water. It's pretty big, but yeah, and that it was going to be fresh water that was going to be going down this thing. And so I'm aware that it's fresh water that's going to be going down there. And once he was sort of finished, I slowly waded into this pond. This, I said, pond/lake. Again, it wasn't massive. At what point does a pond turn into a lake? I don't know. I assume. Well, I always just think of a pond as being a lot smaller. A lake, I don't know. Maybe it's to do with how it's fed. I don't really know actually. Is that but anyway, I mentioned how and I'd waded in like up. This was like up to my chest, sort of. So it was deep. It was pretty deep. This thing, and I mentioned how it wasn't clean water. That there was lots of like gnats and stuff sort of floating around. It wasn't a particularly clean looking color. It was kind of like a greenish kind of color, sort of. Like a little bit muddied, it wasn't clean water, and I just wasn't really understanding why this channel was being created. And as I said, I was kind of concerned that that it was meant to be drinking water, but I was looking at it thinking this cannot be used for drinking water, Anyway, as I said, and somebody else actually waded in with me, but I don't think it was him. Somebody else, but I wrote somebody else waded in as well, but I didn't write who. The fact that I said somebody must have suggested that it wasn't him. Anyway, due to all this pond life, as I said, I felt that it was obviously not at all suited for drinking water, and that if it was going to be used in that source, it certainly needed to be cleaned. But I wasn't sure of what it actually meant. What it was meant to be used for in any way. As I said, it was a little bit strange. So anyway, my thoughts. So as I said, he's developed. So at the time, I didn't really know what to make of that at all. Okay. Now I've kind of done all, as I said, the first little part of the dream, which was a little bit to do with the hotel bit. I'm just going to leave that as it is. I don't think that's got anything major other than ages and stuff like that. I felt, as I said, I in the office also, if you remember, I was surrounded by people young, but I was my current age, and I felt quite old. Whereas in the initial one, I was my own age, but I looked 16, something like that. So there was something going on there with ages, which I don't quite understand. But yeah, I don't quite understand that. And then obviously we've got the lift bit. Again, I think that's something to do with the Antichrist, something to do with maybe the beast system, compliance and stuff like that. Possibly that's to do with, and maybe I wasn't on board in some way, because if you remember, these gardens were kind of locking people in, and it felt like a prison. That, yeah, as I said, I don't really know too much more on that. It might be something I come back to with later revelation, but at the moment I don't really know a great deal. As I said, I've just got that little bit of revelation there with the colours, the black and the black and the red, which, as I said, is in that suffering servant slash beast system slash. Why do I do that? Yeah. Anyway, but as I said, the main thing I want to focus on is part 4, which is all to do with the Jonathan Rumi, who is essentially, as far as I'm concerned, in that dream, I'm not thinking at all of him as Jesus, but coming out of the dream, I'm very much thinking of the symbology of what's going on in this dream. As I said, I'm pretty sure this probably would have been the last dream. And as I mentioned many, many, many times, the last dream, that's the one that you should be paying attention to, okay? So this is the one I should be paying attention to. Sometimes it's progressive as well. So there'll be progressively little bits being dropped in that are leading up to the crescendo or the mic drop moment I mentioned sometimes. There wasn't a mic drop moment with this, but again, anyway, so thoughts. Well, yeah, so I put here, well, let's start with the last part. So obvious question, was Jonathan Rumi meant to represent Jesus? Okay. What, yeah. And I put, yeah, what can I say? Is that I didn't detect a Jesus presence like I did when I actually met Jesus. As I said, it took me a while to say that. I mean, it's incredibly humbling to feel and at this point know that you've actually met God. That's quite humbling, massively humbling, in fact, because of the way that whole. Sorry, I got a bit of a croaky throat. The whole way that experience played out was very much that was Jesus. But again, if you haven't seen that one, absolutely, that's the one. That's the one to watch. So again, I can't know 100% that it was meant to represent Jesus, which I've had other dreams where I've seen Jesus as a character, and it's clearly that's representing him, but I know it's not him. And I've said that in the other dream. I said I saw him, but it wasn't him. This was the same sort of thing, but I would have said I got a bit more of a sense from this one. But anyway. What was curious to me was that he's cutting this channel for water, yet I could not see any water source. As I said, of where this water is meant to flow from. Okay, because it was almost like he was finished. I kind of got a sense of like it was almost like he was finished, but there was no water source, other than the one that's downhill, which obviously water doesn't flow uphill. And it was pond water, and then if it was coming uphill, well then what's the point of pond water just coming up to a patch of grass? Because that's all that was there, was just kind of a little bit of a bit of grass around it. That there was nothing there. So that didn't make sense to me that it would be anything like that, other than that you've got this no water source, but you've got Jonathan Rumi there, who's staying put. Actually, as I said, I'm pretty sure that he didn't come down to the water. I just waded into the water. So yeah, a bit strange that he's digging out a channel for water. Okay, so park that. Symbolically then, I said, interestingly, is how I mentioned about the pond life. Okay, now pond life, so could this mean living water? Okay, Jesus mentions many times in the New Testament about living water. Okay, so pond life, water, living water. That was the connection I made. That provides, and the living water is I'll give you an example. So he talks to the woman at the well. She's a Samaritan woman, so kind of looked down upon by the Jews because they were kind of seen like half breeds. They basically, rather than keeping their a Jew marrying a Jew, and then their children marrying Jews and keeping it all within their tribes and stuff like that as well, is that the Samaritans were basically Jews that ended up marrying, like Babylonians or somebody else, conquering nations, and they kind of mixed, and they didn't like that mixing, and so they referred to them as dogs, the Samaritans, and they looked down on them basically as seeing them as not as good as as an actual proper again, child of Israel. Okay, And so in the woman of the well thing, she feels really inferior because Jesus comes to her and says, will you get some water for me? And she's kind of like, well, you would take water from me, that kind of thing, because she's used to being so seen as low, and she's had loads of husbands as well. So again, on the social standing, she'd be very, very low, I would imagine, and feeling quite ashamed of herself and stuff like that. Also, she's not married, and she's not in a good relationship with her husband and stuff like that. So yeah. But so Jesus talks about there about, look, I'm going to give you living water. I'm going to give you a water that you'll never thirst again. And she's kind of like, well, that sounds good to me, because she's constantly having to go up to the well, and she chooses to go to the well in the absolute peak of the heat because most of the women go early when it's nice and cool, but she's having to go in the blazing heat just because she either feels that she can't be with other women, or those women would sort of talk about her and stuff like that. So she just kind of keeps herself to herself, low profile, under the radar kind of thing in the heat of the day, which is not the time when you want to be doing it. Okay. And she's the sort of person, well, she ends up going and proclaiming, that Jesus knew absolutely everything about her past and stuff like that. And she's this kind of massive chatty person, and it goes off and tells everybody. Okay, so that's that kind of story, but it's talking about living water. So again, you can look, just literally, again, I say Google a lot, but it's just to speed up how you find things. If you just Googled, when does it talk of living water in the Bible, you're going to find loads of stuff come up, loads of stuff. Okay, that's what I think it was talking about, living water, when it's talking about this water that's I'm wading into. Okay, the one I want to concentrate on here actually is, I'm going to read this one out. So living water here, in the context I want to kind of use it as well, is it provides eternal life. Okay, given especially given that it's got no obvious water source here. Okay, so I'm going to go, because of there not being an obvious water source, this is where I'm going to go with Revelation 22:1 specifically. Okay, so, and the title of this is interesting as well. Okay, so the title that you'll probably see in your Bible will say, it'll be titled something like Eden Restored. Okay, so this is when talking about, when Jesus will restore us back to Eden and everything of how it used to be, that kind of thing. But again, that's what the title is suggesting. But this is Revelation 22 verse 1. Okay, so I'm just going to read it. So, then the angel showed me the river of the water of life, as clear as crystal, flowing from the throne of God and the Lamb. So the Lamb is Jesus. Okay, as I said, with the heading of Eden, restored also makes me think of the garden in the previous part of the dream, but I don't know whether there's a connection there at all. May well not be at all. However, it was interesting that there was no escape, so I'm not sure if that fits with Eden, obviously. So yeah, I'm not too sure about that. Also, the bit that again, there's certain things that always draw your attention, was the fact that I said that he will be the last generation of these Masons. Okay. Almost like, was it a nod to us being the last generation? Again, that's another prophecy that happened. It's called, if you Google the fig tree generation, okay, there is basically, it says that when you start to see the fig bloom, you kind of, that's an indication. The majority of people think that because the fig tree, it was always used as a as representing symbolically Israel. Okay, the fig tree. And yeah, it basically talks about when you see the fig tree kind of blooming, that kind of thing, that's an indication of, again, how the prophecy is interpreted is that's Israel being restored. Okay, and those who see that blooming of the nation of Israel, well, then they will be the last generation. And again, I can't remember whether is that Matthew? Yeah, isn't that Matthew 24:34? I'm pretty sure that's the I'm pretty sure that's the correct one. Called the fig tree generation. So anyone who was alive, basically after the Israel was made a nation, which was 1948, there will be someone alive on earth that was born, after 1948, that will be alive for when Jesus returns. So the clock is ticking. Okay, so 1948, if you're born after 1948, you are the last generation. Okay, so most people, I imagine, that would be seeing this video are the last generation. that we'll, that we'll see. Oh, obviously, if if you died in a car crash or you have poor health, then obviously you're going to die before you see Jesus. But what it's really meaning is, the later after that date of birth that you're born, the more and more likely you are to actually see Jesus' return. Okay, again, this is not me just saying it. This is very, very widely held view of the fig tree, what it represents, and that it means that, and the 1948 is kind of like that's kind of like set your clock from there. Now anybody who's been born after that date has the potential to see Jesus return. Okay, so also made me think when I was wading into the water, it felt like baptism as well. It felt like it could represent baptism at the same time. Anytime you see somebody wading into water, it's got to bring that up in your mind. There was another thing I wanted to mention. So some people may see the mason, a stoneworker, and think, well, Jesus didn't do that. He was a carpenter. Okay, what I would suggest you look into then is the Greek word that's used when it describes what Joseph was. So Joseph was obviously Jesus's earthly dad, who would look after him, and obviously Mary, his earthly, his mother. Is the Greek word that's used is tekton, Tekton. I just did a quick Google of this. Again, this is not me making this up. It's potentially Google making it up. No, it's tekton, which apparently in the Greek means more than just a carpenter. So it is translated in the Bible as being carpenter, but it really means a craftsman. And a craftsman that would extend to more than likely things like stonework, potentially metalwork. A craftsman would be a bit more of a wider field of what you would do. It's like saying a builder is somebody who only lays bricks. There's more that they do under that heading, and that's what essentially that was sort of saying there was so Jesus working with stone is perfectly plausible as a thing to happen. Okay, okay, right. So that's all I wanted to say on that part, which I thought was really, really fascinating. That part, as I said, that Jesus is there standing, and he is the source of water that's going to go down this channel, is it that the water that he would be releasing from himself would purify that dirty pond, which could also represent, again, I've said this before, is a lot of people use the analogy of the Holy Spirit, which is the living water, that kind of thing is, Holy Spirit that's referred to as the living water. It says about a spring welling up inside you and stuff like that. So, the living water that would go into that pond, and that would filter it out, and it would make it all clean and crystal clear, like it mentions there in Genesis 22. I wonder whether it's talking about that. As I said, I've heard of quite a few people, which is a great analogy actually. I'm going to use my Ribena there. Look here. So if let's say this is the dirty water, and you have a tap that is pouring in some clean, crystal clear water, eventually all this dirty water is going to spill out, and with enough water going in, it's all going to turn into just water, isn't it? Okay, so if you think of that being essentially representative of sin, just like the dirty water, the pond water could be, then eventually all of that water flowing in would make this pure, and this vessel representing the human is a great analogy, I think, a great way of showing that, and saying that the Holy Spirit filling you is then kind of almost overwhelming and pushing out all of the sin in you, the nature that makes you want to sin, because you're being purified. It's a process called sanctification. Okay, right, we're getting close to an hour. I don't want to go beyond an hour. Right, so what were the other thoughts? Yeah, I'm not going to show you the picture, to be honest. Or shall I? I will. Let's flip it for a second. Here's my incredibly amazing picture of this channel. But you see like the edges to the channel, where it meets the pond. I'm wading into the water, someone else with me, Jonathan Rumi at the top, who doesn't move down and come down to where I'm at. Okay, that's really all there is there. And but yeah, I just thought I'd quickly show you just what I drew it. I've been doing some drawings, you see, just to kind of illustrate anyway. that was pretty much it. Other than, as I said, interesting about the will I am, or will I am bit that was offering, as I said, an additional income for me. That was interesting. And that I am being the name of God. That's something that it's Moses, isn't it? Moses. Was that to do with the burning bush or something like that, where he says, who should I say that sent me when I go down, and I obviously provide them with the tablet, the tablets with the what's it called, the Ten Commandments, all that sort of stuff, and it's and God says, tell them that I am sent you, and he's kind of like, I am, yeah. So that's the name of God. Anyway, yeah, that was my final thoughts. Sorry, that was my final thoughts. So sorry, bit of a long one. Hopefully you got something out of that. I thought it was fascinating. I really wanted to. As soon as I said, I had this kind of revelation coming up today, I was like, I want to film this one now. I want to film it now. Okay, so because of the Jesus aspect. There's another bit, actually, that I might just start doing straight away. Because I've had some really interesting dreams recently, really symbolic. I may just do another one. And the next one's going to be probably called Heavenly Encouragement. Again, that also had Jonathan Rumi in it. Next dream I had that I wrote down also had him in. So, I may just do that. Yeah, okay, look, I'm going to finish there. Thanks for your time. Hopefully you found it interesting, as I said. And on to the next one. Okay, see you soon.